First this hour, nothing is left of Bakhmut, says President Zelensky. The Ukrainian President's office has denied that the eastern city has been captured by Russian forces after a long and bloody battle. He was speaking at the G7 summit following claims by the Wagner paramilitary group that Moscow was now in full control of Bakhmut. Zelensky is joining world leaders for the final day of the gathering in Hiroshima, where he's making the case for further diplomatic and military support. Let's hear what he had to say when he was asked about the situation in Bakhmut.
Mr. President, President Zelensky, is Bakhmut still in Ukraine's hands? The Russians say they've taken Bakhmut.
I think no. But you have to understand that there is nothing. They destroyed our buildings. It's a pity, it's tragedy, but for today, Bakhmut is only in our hearts. There is nothing on this place. So, just ground and a lot of dead Russians. But they came to us.
We aren't going anywhere, says Joe Biden, as he announces a fresh round of military aid for Kyiv. The package, worth $375 million, will include ammunition, artillery and armoured vehicles. He's told President Zelensky that the US was doing all it could to strengthen Ukrainian defences. Let's take a listen.
The United States continues to do all we can to strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself, including launching some new joint efforts with our partners to train Ukrainian pilots on fourth-generation fighter aircraft like the F-16. And this week, the G7 also imposed hundreds of new sanctions and export controls against Russia's assets.
For more, let's speak now with Tristen Naylor. He's a lecturer in international politics and history at the UK-based University of Cambridge. Tristen, thank you so much for being with us this morning here on France 24. You're also Deputy Director of the G7 Research Group. Tell us why Zelensky's presence at the summit in Japan is being so closely watched. Just why is it so significant?
Very often these summits are pretty scripted. Very often they're sort of non-event events. But this weekend here in Hiroshima, this has been a very eventful summit. His arrival here yesterday threw everything going on here into quite an excited fever. And it really matters because the G7, who have been united as a front together and united in their support for Ukraine since the very beginning, since Russia's invasion, finally get to welcome Volodymyr Zelensky to sit at the table with them so that they can quite literally stand shoulder to shoulder with him. It is of profound symbolic significance, but it is also an opportunity for him to press his G7 allies for further support for his cause, for the defense of Ukraine, and also, critically, to also press the invited outreach partners, chief among them India, to change their, shall we say, relatively ambivalent positions on the war in Ukraine and on Russia, to try to bring them into the fold.
Do you think he will succeed in doing that? As you say, his allies may be united, but there's a lot of scepticism in Brazil and India.
I'm under no illusion that it won't be easy, and nor are any of the leaders here at the summit. But it's an opportunity. It's a chance. And certainly under Japanese leadership, and certainly with some very adept diplomacy on the part of France and on the part of the United States, they're taking the opportunity that is presented here. I don't believe that Narendra Modi leaves Hiroshima thinking that he's about to fundamentally change his policy and by extension that of India with respect to Russia. But in a couple of months' time, Narendra Modi will be welcoming the world in Delhi for the G20 summit. And he has an opportunity to set the conditions for peace. He has the opportunity to bring an end to this war by shifting his position. And all the leaders here, when they had time with Modi, certainly pressed him on the issue, and certainly Zelensky would have done so in their one-on-one bilateral.
And now we heard Zelensky responding to a question about Bakhmut. He's previously described the city as a fortress of Ukrainian morale. If it has fallen to Russia, is this just a symbolic victory for Moscow? Just how significant would it be, seeing as Zelensky said himself, there's nothing left there?
Look, I'm not a military strategist, so I'm not going to comment on what kind of victory this is. But certainly, to describe a city as no longer being there is significant. That the human cost of this war is profoundly illustrated by such a description. And it's worth noting where we are right now. We are in Hiroshima, a city that was no longer there because of the horrors of war. And so for the Ukrainian president to be here and describing what is going on, not in the past, but today, this is profoundly evocative, and it should touch us in a profound and profoundly human way.
Tristen, G7 leaders, they're clearly applying pressure to Moscow, but they've taken, just briefly, a different approach to Beijing.
Well, with Beijing, with China, first and foremost, there's not open warfare here, but the G7 are perfectly aware that there are certain areas in which they do need to confront Beijing, chief among them Taiwan, perhaps second or equally so, the question of economic coercion. And the G7 have, in their communique, affirmed their resolve to contest China where it needs to be contested. But it's important to note that there are areas in which the G7 are open and indeed working with China in cooperation, climate change being a chief one. So it is, no relationship is two-dimensional. And certainly the relationship between the G7 and China is a multifaceted one. Sometimes it's about cooperation, sometimes it's about contestation.
OK, we'll leave it there, Tristen. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. That's Tristen Naylor, a lecturer and also Deputy Director of the G7 Research Group, joining us from Japan.